You probably know the jailbreak scene already. Gun smoke, shouts, maybe a little dramatic music in the background. Doc Holliday making a break for freedom as if the Wild West was just waiting for him to put on a show. But that's the version Hollywood stitched together, and it misses the most immediate physical piece of the story. The real jailbreak wasn't a clean act of bravado or a puzzle to be solved. It was a desperate, suffocating ordeal, fueled by fire, clouded with smoke, and marked by the kind of bodily misery that legend tends to sweep under the rug. The gap between the movie version and the event itself is more than just a few missing details. It's a chasm, and what fell into it was the breathless, bloody, panic-soaked reality that Doc and Kate actually lived. According to widely repeated histories and period press, the story goes like this. Doc Holliday was locked away in a Texas jail, staring down a murder charge. His partner, Mary Catherine Horney, better known as Big Nose Kate, hatched a plan straight out of dime novel legend. She set a fire as a diversion, whipped up a panic, and then, with the jailhouse in chaos, forced the guards to free Doc at gunpoint. In this retelling, Kate becomes the fiery outlaw's last hope, and the jailbreak plays as a masterstroke of Old West audacity, a rescue pulled off by sheer nerve and a well-timed blaze. But here's what almost never makes it into the retellings, the physical hell of that night. Most versions speed past the body, the coughing fits, the raw throat, the black smoke that didn't just hide the action but choked it. They skip the way panic smells, the way fear feels when you can't get air, and the mounting sense that your body might give out before you ever see daylight. The stories favor quick cuts and clever escapes, not the drawn-out misery of a sick man trying to survive a burning building and a gunpoint gamble. Most legends just leave that part on the cutting room floor. In reality, Doc Holliday wasn't the swaggering figure you see on screen. He was gravely ill, his body already battered by tuberculosis. Contemporary sources confirm he was coughing up blood in jail, gaunt and wasted, far closer to collapse than to any kind of heroic stand. The jail itself was no gentle holding cell either, a place where disease could fester, and even on an ordinary day, the air was thick and the accommodations pitiless. For Doc, every breath was already a struggle, every cough a reminder that his lungs were failing. So when the fire started and the smoke thickened, it wasn't just a clever distraction. It was a direct assault on a body already hanging by a thread. The escape wasn't just daring. It was a scramble for survival, with a man who could barely stand, let alone fight or run. According to later retellings and period summaries, Kate's plan was equal parts desperation and bravado. She set a fire as a diversion, then stormed the jail with at least one gun, threatening the officers on duty. The fire was meant to draw attention and panic, pulling the town's few lawmen away from their posts. Once the flames and smoke had everyone scrambling, Kate confronted the remaining staff at gunpoint, forcing them to release Doc. Some accounts put her alone, others add a helper, but all agree she took the lead, risking her own life in a place where armed resistance from guards was expected. The reported goal was simple: create enough chaos that Doc could slip out in the confusion before the fire burned too hot or the local crowd turned against them. This wasn't a clean, clever heist. It was a gamble where every second counted, and the only thing more dangerous than jail was jail on fire. To understand what that meant in real terms, you have to picture the typical Texas jail of the 1870s. Based on period evidence and logical reconstruction, these jails were small, cramped, and rough. Bare wooden or adobe cells with little insulation, tiny windows, and almost no proper ventilation. The air inside was already heavy and stale, especially with a sick prisoner. Add fire, and the space quickly turned into a chokehold of heat and rolling smoke, with everything flammable: wood beams, straw bedding, even clothing and dry timbers. Under these conditions, starting a fire wasn't just a distraction. It was an invitation for panic and a real risk of being burned or suffocated before you ever made it to the door. The threat wasn't just guards and bullets. It was heat, smoke inhalation, and the very real possibility that the jail would become a death trap before Doc could be dragged clear. So what do the records actually say about that chaotic scene? Here's what's directly supported. Multiple accounts confirm there was a fire involved in Doc's jailbreak, and that Kate played an active role in creating a distraction. Sources describe smoke pouring from the jail, townsfolk and officers rushing to respond, and confusion among the guards. There are contemporary claims of a pistol being drawn on the jailer, and of hollering, panic, and at least one person being threatened. But not every detail is nailed down. Some accounts are light on whether Kate was holding the gun herself or had help. Others simply focus on the confusion and the fire, without describing the escape step by step. What they agree on is the outcome. Doc Holliday, coughing blood and barely on his feet, made it out, thanks to smoke, chaos, and the threat of violence. But there's a reason every retelling sounds a little different. The historical record leaves gaps, especially when it comes to specific details about the fire's size, exactly how Kate handled the guards, and what happened to Doc's body after he stumbled out. We don't get a play-by-play of every smoky breath, every bruise or burn, or every moment of fumbling at the lock. Instead, we have a mosaic, a fire, a desperate rescue, and a barely living outlaw staggering into the daylight. The missing pieces don't make the story less real. They just remind us that even the wildest jailbreaks leave some of their smoke behind, obscuring the details. Here's where the myth of a clever jailbreak runs headlong into fire and flesh. Based on period accounts and what we know about old jails and medical reality, we can plausibly reconstruct the moment Kate set her plan in motion. The fire didn't flicker neatly in one corner. It was a fast, choking thing. Smoke billowed through the cracks in the jailhouse walls, curling around iron bars and pooling near the ceiling. Within minutes, everything changed. Heat pressed in, sweat popped out, and the air stung with the bitter tang of burning wood and fabric. Coughs echoed, hoarse, desperate, some spattered with blood. Doc Holliday, already weak from tuberculosis, struggled for every breath. Guards and prisoners alike were blinded, hacking, bumping into each other and the walls, as the smoke thickened and the world shrank to a sour, suffocating haze. The only thing worse than jail was jail on fire, and now everyone knew it. The escape itself was frantic and physical, not a smooth Hollywood slide into freedom. Reconstructed from the best evidence, this was a scramble. A gun or the threat of one forced the guards to act, fumbling with the ring of heavy iron keys as their eyes watered and they nearly dropped everything in the confusion. Kate, determined, kept them moving, no time for hesitation. Doc stumbled forward, both hands gripping the bars for support. When the door finally swung open, he lurched out, but with every cough, blood spattered the stone floor. His body threatened to give out with every step. It was chaos. Shouts, boots pounding, the stink of fear and smoke, and somewhere behind them, flames crackling louder as the fire caught. Outside, the confusion deepened. While we don't have a direct, minute-by-minute account, it's a plausible inference, based on patterns in period jailbreaks and the fire's scale, that townsfolk had gathered, drawn by the commotion and the sudden rise of black smoke. Some tried to douse the flames or shout for help. Others just stared, wide-eyed. In the midst of this chaos, Kate and Doc had to push through, Doc barely upright, Kate half dragging, half steering him through a crowd that was as much an obstacle as an escape route. Every breath was a struggle, their eyes watering, both stumbling over uneven ground as the jail's door gaped behind them and flames licked hungrily at the roof. Here's where Doc's condition nearly undid the whole rescue. Tuberculosis and the panic left him dazed, gasping, and close to collapse. As Doc staggered, dangerously close to dropping right there in the street, Kate put her arm around his waist and hauled him upright, dragging most of his weight. In those moments, her determination was all that separated Doc from the jail, the fire, and whatever came next. For all the legend's talk of bold escapes, the reality was a dying man barely making it out alive. Every step owed to someone else's grit and the chaos that covered their flight. The ordeal didn't end at the jailhouse door. Doc Holliday survived, but not in any heroic, striding out into the night fashion. He was physically wrecked, shaking violently, still gasping for air, and coughing up blood from the exertion and the smoke he'd just inhaled. He was close to collapse, barely conscious, and needing to be half carried by Kate for blocks. The escape had gotten him out, but at the cost of nearly everything his body had left to give. He didn't just walk away from danger. He staggered into a whole new set of problems, with the marks of the fire and the panic still fresh on his clothes, his skin, and in every ragged breath. The price of this jailbreak wasn't just exhaustion and smoke. The facts are clear. Doc was now a fugitive on the run, bloodied, sick, and with the law hunting for him harder than ever. Kate's role as the instigator put her at enormous risk as well. She'd threatened armed men, started a fire, and publicly broken the law. Law enforcement didn't just shrug and let them disappear. There were manhunts, interrogations, and, for a time, the very real possibility of new charges and retribution. Whatever romantic flair the story takes on in legend, the actual aftermath was messy, unpredictable, and dangerous for both Doc and Kate. Their lives became a scramble of hiding, coughing, fits, and fear, not the triumphant ride into the sunset that later retellings prefer. So how did this dirty, dangerous escape become a legend? Period newspapers and later historians helped spread a version that trimmed away the suffering and focused on the spectacle. According to these accounts, Doc and Kate's escape became a story of daring, cleverness, and even a kind of Western romance. The fire, the gun, the dash to freedom, these were the headlines. The panic, the blood, the humiliation of being dragged through the dirt by someone fighting for your life as much as their own, those details faded out in public memory. What was erased for the audience was the sense of bodily risk, chaos, and aftermath, the parts that didn't fit the myth of the Wild West's unstoppable outlaws. In the end, the real jailbreak wasn't a clean legend. It was a feat of endurance and survival with suffering, physical, mental, and legal, at its very core. Doc Holliday's escape was about chaos, risk, and the narrowest margin between life and catastrophe. The myth may have polished away the grime and the pain, But if you look at the evidence, what happened in that burning jail is less about swagger than it is about a sick man and an outlaw partner fighting through fire, fear, and failing bodies for one impossible shot at freedom. If you want to know what it really meant to break out of jail in the Old West, start with the smoke, the coughing, and the blood, because that's what the legend tried hardest to forget.